we would like to invite Ms. Nguyen, who is the ocean industry lead of the World Economic Forum.
And welcome to the last sessions, the last plenary session of today. It's a pleasure to see you all here. My name is Hanh Nguyen. I'm from the World Economic Forum. When we talk about building a nature-positive future, we often begin on land. But the reality is that we cannot achieve a nature-positive future without an ocean-positive strategy. The ocean is the planet's largest ecosystem. It regulates our climate, supports biodiversity, underpins global food security and trade, and also sustains livelihoods of billions of people. Despite such a fundamental role, the ocean is systematically overlooked in financial and economic decision-making. That is beginning to change. And over the past few years, we have seen remarkable momentum at the international framework as well as at the local and regional level. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, for example, with its 30 by 30 target, has established an ambitious goal to protect nature and, of course, the ocean. The adoption of the High Seas Treaty, or the BBNJ agreement, has made a historic step in safeguarding marine biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. And the WTO agreement on fishery subsidies has also made meaningful progress towards more sustainable fisheries, as well as a continued negotiation at the International Maritime Organization on shaping the future of sustainable shipping. So, with all of these efforts on the international stage, taken together, these developments really signal an important turning point for the blue economy. They provide a stronger policy foundation and greater clarity on the direction of travel. However, international agreements are not enough to deliver on the transformation for nature positive that we need. That is why today we have also a lot of private sector leaders and business leaders joining us in the conversation, because the next phase should be implementation of the global ambition. Business have such an opportunity to contribute to the nature positive transformation, and I'm delighted to be joined by an outstanding panel of leaders who are joined me here with business and international organizations who are helping to shape this ocean positive transition. So as you can see on the far left side of mine is Mr. Wakao Hanaoka. He's the CEO of Seafood Legacy. Then we have Mr. Akihiko Nishi, the General Manager of the Sustainable Department at Nissui Corporation. Next, we have Mr. Adam Brennan, who is the Chief Sustainability and Communications Officer of Thai Union Group. And then we have Ms. Yuko Tsutsui, who is the Managing Executive Officer, Chief Executive Sustainability Transformation Headquarters of Nippon, Yusen, Kaisha, and YK Line. And finally, we have Ms. Chizuru Aoki, who is the manager of the Conventions and Funds Division of the Global Environment Facility. So can we have a round of applause for our panelists, please? Thank you. If someone could put back the slide, we actually have a poll for the audience to scan and engage. We have questions for you to answer on the ocean topic. If you can scan this poll and have the questions there and choose your answer, we will be able to revisit the results perhaps later in the session. Great. So with that, we're going to begin the sessions today, and thank you again for being here. First, I would like to turn to Ms. Aoki from the Global Environment Facility as we open the conversation, because I would like to start with the global multilateral and financing perspective. In the current GEF funding period, There's a substantial share of the public environmental finance that has supported ocean and marine-related activities. Actually, more than 90% of the Special Climate Change Fund, 40% of the least developed countries, and 25% of the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund is dedicated to this topic. So from your vantage point, Ms. Aoki, what does this tell us about how countries are positioning the blue economy within their nature policy transition and within their economic biodiversity and development strategy?
Thank you for the question. I would like to start by very quickly summarizing the role of the Global Environment Facility, because I don't represent the private sector, and I think we have a very special role to play. So we, the GF, we serve as basically the financial arm, the financial mechanism of the 6 multilateral conventions, and those include the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Climate Convention, but also the BBNJ, the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdictions. So we're supporting developing countries to address their national priorities for them to meet the targets as well as goals of these multilateral global agreements, including the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the Paris Agreement. And we do this through management of what we call the family of funds, which we have 6 funds right now. So the positive news, to answer your question, is that we're really seeing that the momentum is building on this blue economy sphere, and more developing countries are prioritizing blue economy across the climate, biodiversity, and more generally speaking, the development landscape. And countries are actually coming to seek much better alignment as well as synergy and multiple benefits as they access support. So in the GEF 8 period, which we literally finished 2 weeks ago, we operate like the Olympics, we operate in the 4-year cycle. We saw this prioritization on blue economy across all the funds we have, as you mentioned. And we saw this in climate adaptation as well as the newest fund that we have. It's called the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, the GBFF. And it's really interesting that the countries are coming to us to access resources on investments in ocean marine relevant activities to really address their economic sector priorities, the ecosystems, livelihoods, and all things wrapped into one. Just to give you an example for the Least Developed Countries Fund, which is a fund for climate adaptation of the most vulnerable 46 least developed countries around the world, more than 40% of the resources that the countries ask for, which is about $305 million. We're looking into sustainable fisheries development, enhancing climate resilience for coastal communities, marine ecosystems, sustainable management of fisheries, aquaculture, national habitats, things of that nature. Then we also saw 30 by 30 integrated management of coastal marine ecosystems under the new fund, the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, so on and so forth. And so we were very encouraged to see this because these are in addition to the traditional and most significant oceans-related support that we provide through the main GF Trust Fund, which provided $594 million of support in the past 4-year period. And those are done in a much more integrated fashion, addressing biodiversity, international waters, and also climate goals. Last but not least, let me just say something about the support for the BBNJ, the new agreement. So we all know the BBNJ reached agreement only 3 years ago. Already, we've had 86 countries, developing countries, come to the GF asking for support on the BBNJ. And what they have asked for is to create these enabling conditions, meaning how to assess the extent to which their current legal policy, institutional frameworks are set up to address the priorities as well as the obligations under the new treaty. And they are also coming to us to have the readiness within the country's institutions and policies to enable to meet what they're signing up to do for the BBNJ. So we find these are very good, interesting new opportunities. The countries have woken up to access more integrated manner as well as across the family of funds. And this is all very good news for the blue economy as well as the ocean agenda writ large. So we are very excited to see that.
Thank you so much for such an impressive answer, as well as also a lot of exciting opportunities for countries to invest in the blue economy. Maybe very quickly to follow up on that, since you're also sitting on the panel with many of the business leaders as well, what policy frameworks and financing mechanism do you think that we look ahead we are needed for also, not just pilot project, but attracting more large-scale project from the private sector?
Yeah, that's a very good question. If you ask the countries, you ask the developing countries, where do you see the implementation challenges? And there has been work done on the CBD for their national reports. We've also asked the countries that they do the early action support for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. They tend to tell you the same things, right? The gaps as well as the challenges they face are actually insufficient financial resources, not enough money going into to support the activities they need, private sector, public sector, all over. And the second element has to do with the lack of or very weak mainstreaming in national sectoral policies, as well as institutional coordination. So who are these players around the table, including the private sector? Who are the national government partners, so on and so forth? So it's very clear. And even if you look at the sustainable blue economy, there was a recent report done by UNEP. Some of the challenges identified are very much similar. It has to do with the policy coherence as well as the lack of resources. And yesterday in the panel conversations, we also heard from the private sector entities. At the end of the day, they really want to see clear rules of engagement as well as the direction of travel, and money somehow will follow that. So from our perspective, the key challenges in various analysis, whatever we have seen, is that there needs to be a much clearer policy, institutional finance linkage in nexus writ large. What does that mean for the GEF? We see two things. One is that at the end of the day, these elements as well as priorities have to be done in a country-driven manner. Countries have to basically embrace the blue economy, the marine agenda, BBNJ wholeheartedly. And not only that, there has to be a shared goal as well as basically the roadmap that's shared among the institutions and the private sector and all entities writ large within the country. And the second goal we see is that how are we going to fill this $1 trillion of financial gap that we heard about yesterday? And funds like the GEF, we can play a very catalytic role, but we're not going to be able to fill the entire financial gap on our own. So with that, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that that we're utilizing the precious public multilateral resources in a much smarter way, which can actually catalyze additional support from the private sector. Instruments like blended finance, non-grant instruments, having much more clarity on how the private sector can join, I think is very important. Another element that's very clear to us is that maybe we need to think about really reducing the financial gap in it itself. And this has to do with much better articulation of multiple benefits, right, across the board, and also reducing harmful practices. So these are the elements that we have identified, and we're very much committed to work with all the partners as well as countries, and ultimately help countries establish and maintain clear rules of engagement. And that's not just for the policy, but for that to catalyze, mobilize additional resources as well as partnership with the private sector. So.
Thank you, Ms. Aoki, for setting out the stage for us on the global momentum on both policy and finance, and also how that could act as a catalyst for businesses to come in. So with that, I would like now to turn into our business leaders in on the panel, who actually in the sectors that they're operating in interact with the ocean every day. I would like to now to turn to Ms. Tsutsui-san. You are the Chief Sustainability Officer, also transformation of NYK Line, one of the biggest shipping companies. So shipping is really actually a cornerstone of global trade, and is also interacting with the marine ecosystems in many different ways. According to you, Tsutsui-san, one of the world leading companies as NYK Line, how do you balance the imperative between decarbonize, because now we have heard a lot of decarbonization talk in the shipping areas, but also how do you integrate ocean ecosystem health and biodiversity in this mandate?
Oh, thank you, Hanh-san. Hello, I'm Yuko Tsutsui. I'm leading the sustainability strategy of NIK Group. It is very honorable for me to join today's session. And to answer the Hansan's question, first of all, I'd like to point out that international shipping is a very important infrastructure that supports approximately 90% of global trade, as Hansen said. And of course, the shipping industry itself depends on the healthy marine ecosystem. As a leading company in the international shipping industry, we view decarbonization and marine environmental conservation not as separate issues, but rather as two sides of the same coin. This is because climate change itself is one of the greatest threats to marine biodiversity, and issues such as rising sea temperature, ocean acidification, and issues such as degradation of marine ecosystem are all interrelated. Our decarbonization efforts are not merely about reducing GHG emissions. They are also critical initiative to protect the health of the oceans. NYK is accelerating its efforts toward net zero through next-generation fuels, energy-saving technologies, and operational efficiency improvements, while simultaneously focusing on the broader impacts on the marine environment, including issues related to underwater noise, ballast water, and biofueling that leads to invasive species, and impact on marine areas critical to biodiversity, with the goal of realizing a truly sustainable shipping industry. In other words, we are striving to transform from a company that uses the ocean to a company that supports the ocean. I'd like to discuss our three core pillars. The first is science. To protect the marine environment, we must first understand the ocean. Of course, it is not easy, but I think the shipping industry has a unique role to play for blue economy, because as an industry that navigates the world ocean daily and is best positioned to observe changes in the marine environment firsthand. And we are working to accumulate scientific knowledge through environmental DNA surveys and analysis to marine ecosystem. The second is governance. Shipping is global industry, and the solutions must be global as well. We are actively involved in the international rulemaking at the IMO, International Maritime Organization, and in frameworks such as TNFD, contributing to the development of rules for the sustainable use of the oceans. The third pillar is action. We are advocating nature restoration activities, such as seaweed bed restoration in Akita Prefecture, river restoration in Philippines, and forest restoration in Gotemba, Shizuoka Prefecture, in collaboration with local communities and research institutes. We believe that the oceans are not merely a physical space for transportation, but it should be recognized as natural capital that underpins the global economy. Protecting this natural capital and passing it on to future generations is both the responsibility and the significant opportunity of us. The shipping industry of the future should be net zero and nature positive. Net zero and nature positive are not separate goals. a net zero economy cannot be achieved without healthy oceans, and healthy oceans cannot be achieved without proactive action by the maritime industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tsutsui-san. And I really enjoyed the fact that you also highlight the evolution of the shipping industry from an ocean user towards an ocean steward, right? And the fact that ocean is being recognized more and more as critical natural capital for different industries to rely on. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to move to another sector in the ocean that is even more dependent on the healthy ecosystems, which is the seafood sector. So, with pleasure to introduce Mr. Adam Brennan, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Thai Union. Adam, you are also the driving force behind Thai Union Sea Change 2030 strategy and vision, and it has been cited amongst a lot of people that I've talked to as a very ambitious vision for ocean stewardship and also a nature-positive future. So what are the biggest challenges and opportunities, according to you, for the global seafood value chain to integrate the biodiversity elements of haunting and reversing nature loss?
Thanks, Han, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I think it's fantastic that we conclude an amazing 2 days by discussing the importance of our oceans, both as it relates to the nature agenda, but also as it relates to the food system agenda as well. Because after all, our oceans are responsible for feeding billions of people every year. Annual capacity now exceeds 220 million tons. But the facts are the facts. That production causes significant pressure on our oceans, and specifically on nature and biodiversity. And that pressure translates into real consequences. It is estimated that 1/3 of global fisheries are overfished. And 1 in 5 fish comes from illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, which undermines the efforts that are going in to responsible fisheries management and conservation efforts. So it's very clear at a global level, there is still much work to be done to halt the loss before we can even start discussing reversing and restoring. But there is also good news. One of the biggest categories within Thai Union, by far, is tuna. We started our sustainability journey almost 10 years to the day. And through a decade of investment, through industry collaboration with our competitors on a pre-competitive basis, through partnerships with NGOs, through engagement with governments, and with science backing our decisions, there is a blueprint that we can follow to create positive impacts within the seafood sector. So tuna is a great example of how we can be doing this. And that blueprint for us really looked as the follows. It started with traceability. You can't restore what you can't see. So traceability for us was the fundamental pillar in which we built our sustainability agenda on. We analyzed all of our sourcing countries or flag states. We now have the ability to digitally trace all of the vessels that we are sourcing from, because we do not own any tuna vessels ourselves. We then started setting standards, and we worked with a number of different stakeholders to create an independent improvement framework. Now, this framework doesn't create change overnight, but it leads to continuous improvement. And because we started 10 years ago, we are now starting to see the real benefits of that improvement work. 99.5% of the tuna that Thai Union now sources is responsibly sourced. Much of that improvement work that has been happening over the last decade has now resulted into certification, which in the seafood sector is one of the primary tools that we use to ensure that we're sourcing responsibly and that we're minimizing the impact on our oceans. But we also don't stop at certification either. We go above and beyond, especially as it relates to nature and especially as it relates to bycatch and protecting and safeguarding endangered, threatened, and protected species. So here, what's really important for the seafood sector is to increase our visibility at sea. And Thai Union has a commitment for 100% of the tuna that we source to have on-the-water monitoring. That is either through a human observer or through electronic monitoring. And that's really where over the last 5 years, we've really upped our investment so that all of the tuna that we now source either has a human observer or electronic monitoring. And that ensures that we are able to reduce the risk and the impact on our oceans, onto nature and biodiversity, and to make sure that the vessels which we're sourcing from are acting responsibly.
Thanks so much, Adam, for such a detailed but also very practical example of your traceability strategy. And also you mentioned in terms of how seafood is sourced, is progressed, as well as is treated. Thai Union, as biggest companies in the seafood sector, has a lot of influence over that. How do you see that other industries can learn from that experience? Maybe very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, I think we recognize very early on that we cannot do this alone. I think one of the most important things is to identify what you are good at, but also where you need support. And here we have a number of key flagship commitments together with civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations. So when I talk about enhancing transparency at sea and driving responsible tuna sourcing, we have a commitment with the Nature Conservancy, who are actually helping us to implement this, but they are also helping to monitor and report out on it. So every couple of years we do a progress report together with the Nature Conservancy, and it talks about where we have succeeded, where we have made progress, but it also talks where we're falling short. We have another commitment with the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, who do a lot of work with us on bycatch and endangered, threatened, and protected species, together with BirdLife International and the Dolphin and Whale Society. So they are helping to understand at a fishery level where the risks are and what best practices can be implemented at the fishery level and at the vessel level. So I think one of my biggest, recommendations is really to hold your hands up where you need support, to look out there on who is offering that support, and to create challenging yet pragmatic partnerships which help to move the needle, and really create positive impacts. These partnerships often feel uncomfortable, and they should feel uncomfortable, because that's what really creates positive change that our ocean so much deserves. So don't let perfection be the enemy of making progress.
Excellent. Very, very important point on collaboration with other stakeholders, and also not with someone who agree with you, but also someone who could hold you accountable as well. Thank you very much, Brennan-san. Now I would like to turn to Nishi-san, who is the General Manager of Sustainability Department in Nissui Corporation, also a very, very big player in the seafood sector. So Nishi-san, you are a leader really in the Japanese marine products, and also you're the pioneer in adopting the TNFD requirements in the company in Nissui. So how is Nissui turning the nature-related disclosure and stakeholder evaluation into your business action? But also, very importantly, I know that Nissui is also a very innovative company. So what role does technological innovation play in supporting an ocean policy transition and also a more resilient business models and supply chains?
はい、日水の西と申します。私は日本語です。
I am Nishi from Nissui. I would like to speak in Japanese. So Nissui is sourcing seafood from around the world and then add value and deliver that to the customers across the world. As such, we are very much dependent on the nature capital, especially the ecosystem service of the ocean. We heavily depend on that. That is the nature of our business. Therefore, the dependency on the ocean first and foremost needs to be fully understood. and the dependency to be understood, and then we sort out what are the impacts and consequences, and we come up with risks and opportunities and responses. And then they have been put together in the format of TNFD reporting and issues that towards the stakeholders on a regular basis. TNFD disclosure is not just disclosing a tool. In our business, when we implement initiatives, we need to have such a tool of disclosure. So it's not a disclosure for the sake of disclosure. It's just a starting point. So the most recent report focused on aquaculture business of our company. And the theme that I wanted to introduce to you today is this recent report focusing on aquaculture and what are the opportunities that we have identified. The yellowtail aquaculture is something we are doing, and yellowtail aquaculture, usually we catch baby the yellowtail and put them into the farming, and then over 3 years we grow them. That is a usual way of aquaculture. But then without catching those baby yellowtail, we have the complete aquaculture cycle that we can turn within our company 100%, meaning that we don't have to catch baby yellowtail from the nature. So we are reducing the dependency on the natural resources in our aquaculture business. And there are a lot of opportunities there as well. One of them is, because it's a complete aquaculture, meaning that we can actually cross good individual yellowtail with another good individual yellowtail to make a better yellowtail species for us. For instance, when because of the climate change, the sea temperature may go up, which is making the aquaculture difficult, or there may be a problem of the lack or shortage of the feed that we can feed the aquaculture fish. But through the breeding, we can create a species that is more resistant to the heat during the summer, or make yellowtail simply big. And usually the winter time is the yellowtail season, and usually the shipping is concentrated during the winter. But then we can actually supply yellowtail across the year with a complete aquaculture. So these are the opportunities that we have identified while reducing the burden on the nature. And these are the opportunities that we are communicating to the stakeholders, including investors, in our TNFD report. And we engage with stakeholders as well. And we reflect their voices in our business so that we can actually come up with better, improved cycles. And such initiatives, when they are disclosed, investors receive these initiatives as expectations, and this works positively for financing. Back in February of this year, Blue Nature Bond, which is a corporate bond that we issued for the first time to raise 10 billion yen. And of course, in terms of aquaculture technologies, we need to make quite a lot of investment into those aquaculture technologies. But by disclosing those initiatives to the investors, and when they agree and want to support such initiatives, they can raise money for us. And then that can lead to even better technologies in the aquaculture. So such a virtual cycle is running right now. How can we change the finance flow? How can we attract more money to our company? This is something in our mind to deepen our initiatives in our business. And by running this cycle, we can actually make contribution to nature positive with our robust business. So that's what we are doing. Thank you.
And I think you outlined a very important consideration that disclosure is only the starting point, and it's very important to actually act on that and integrate that into your operations and communicate that with your investors. Thank you for the intervention. Now we have, last but not least, Hanaoka-san. You are the CEO of Seafood Legacy, and you set up the organization in order to explore more Japan-centric solutions for seafood sustainability. So we have heard on this panel example from both Japanese, of course, and regional and global businesses in driving change. How do you think, from your experience, that industries-led collaborations or other types of partnerships can support creating the conditions for stronger, business leadership in this space?
Thank you very much for the question. And also thank you very much for this opportunity to be here, for me to be here. So we start from one simple belief. Without healthy ocean, there's no thriving seafood economy. And without collaboration, there will be no healthy oceans. In many ways, seafood should be one of the world's most renewable food systems. Yet today, wild fish have reached their limits, like what Adam has mentioned. According to the FAO, fewer than 10% of global marine fish stock still have room for increased harvest. At the same time, global seafood demand continues to grow. If we want the seafood sector to embrace nature positive, sustainability must be rewarded, and the strongest incentive should come from the marketplace. The future of seafood will be determined not only by how we fish, but by how market rewards sustainability. And market change fastest when companies move together. I'm delighted to share this panel together with both Nissui and Thai Union. Their leadership reminds us that market transformation is not driven by one company or one country, but by companies moving together across the regions. Japan is one of the world's largest seafood markets in the world, and home to many of the world's largest seafood companies. To help drive this transformation, we established the Japan Responsible Seafood Procurement Roundtable, a pre-competitive platform where leading companies work together on challenges that no company can solve alone, from traceability to human rights and environmental due diligence. But collaboration is not only about creating platforms, it is also about creating the conditions for continuous multi-sector dialogue. Since 2015, so like 12 years ago, we have organized the Sustainable Seafood Summit, not simply as a conference, but as a platform where business, governments, investors, CSOs, and researchers, they all build a shared understanding needed for market transformation. Today, it has become Asia's largest multi-stakeholder platform for sustainable seafood. Why does all this matter? Because policies do not emerge in a vacuum. Industry identifies common challenges, tests practical solutions, and demonstrate what is possible. Governments gain confidence when they see solutions that are practical, scalable, and supported by the market. That's how voluntary action creates the conditions for stronger public policy. We have seen this in Japan through recent fisheries and seafood import control reforms. Those reforms did not begin with regulations. They were built on years of voluntary industry actions and continuous multi-stakeholder dialogue. The lesson we have learned is simple. Market moves first, policy follows. Finally, let me say a word about the relationship between voluntary actions and the regulation. We often explain it through the movement of a caterpillar. The front of the caterpillar represents voluntary action. Companies move first. They innovate, experience, and develop better practices. The back represents regulation. It catches up and turns those innovations into society's new baseline. Once that baseline is established, companies are free to move forward again. So voluntary action and regulations are complementary forces that keep progress moving. When market moves, production changes. When production changes, then policy moves, policy follows. That's how we build a nature-positive seafood future together. So if we can align markets, governments, investors, and civil society around a shared purpose, nature-positive will become more than an environmental ambition. It will become the foundation of the thriving seafood future because the future of the seafood depends not only on healthy ocean, but also on our ability to work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hanaoka-san, to point out also, what are volunteer actions and what are public regulations have a role to play, and also collaboration between multi-stakeholders collaboration as well. Now that we have heard from all of the panels, I wanted to do a quick closing round and give each panelist 1 minute opportunity to close. So we have seen that also throughout all of your intervention that the perception of the ocean is changing. It used to be think of a resource as to extract, but then now it's becoming more and more of something as an asset to include and to steward. What do you think the next mindset shift should be for policymakers, for business leaders, for international organizations as well? What's the next mindset shift? I go with Ms. Aoki first and then.
Okay. So
just 1 minute.
Yeah, very quickly. I think there are two things that we can focus on. One is on the whole issue of mainstreaming this agenda more as a universal priority, as well as said earlier, it has to be a shared purpose. That's number one. Number two is that we need to think about raising ambition, and we can do this with partnership, but we need to do that with very clear targets. Okay, so talk a little bit of a mainstreaming universal priority. The blue economy activities are not confined to waters only. We talked about the shipping, fisheries, and so on and so forth, as well as market change. And when I talked about the BB&J, it's not just the small island developing states as well as ocean states. There's a number of landlocked countries as well as others that are very much interested and engaged in wanting to do their part for the BB&J treaty. So we need to have this sense that this is a universal shared priority with a shared purpose. That's number one. Number two, there's a lot of good examples. For example, the Blue Nature Alliance's impact multiplier that we're supporting. And it's about a global initiative designed to accelerate the pace, scale, and effectiveness of ocean conservation with major philanthropies. But it's not just that there is a partnership. There has to be a purpose as well as what will be the benchmarks as well as indicators. So 30 by 30, advance high quality protection in 5% of the oceans, but also to have very clear mindset of making conservation available for a larger number of countries, but also for increasing ocean protection in underserved regions. So these are some of the things in terms of clear targets as well as the power of partnership to raise the level of ambition globally. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Aoki-san.
Thank you.
Then we go to Tsutsui-san, and maybe the result of the poll at the beginning of the session could be disclosed as well so that the audience can see. Tsutsui-san.
Okay. Just quickly, just one thing. The shift in mindset, which might be most important to moving away from viewing nature conservation as a cost, but it's investment in the fundamental assets. And I really hope policymakers and investors will also recognize that the nature conservation is an investment for the future and to materialize a blue economy itself. That's it.
Thank you so much, Brennan-san.
Thank you. So I think, for Thai Union, we invest tens of millions of dollars into our responsible sourcing program. And we do that because nature doesn't sit on the environmental agenda. It sits in the boardroom. And to get it in the boardroom, it needs to sit on the economic agenda. It needs to sit on the resiliency agenda. And we've got to stop looking at nature positive as a hindrance to growth and start to look at it as the foundation for growth. Because for seafood, without healthy oceans, there simply is no seafood.
Thank you, Nissui-san.
はい、ありがとうございます。一つ
Thank you very much. I would like to just say one thing. That is, if you are a company that do not protect the nature but make profit in a short run, that is something we have to change. Because those companies that are serious about their initiatives, they will be dismotivated. They will lose motivation. And for that purpose, we need to have regulations We need to have stakeholders, including investors, supporting us. So we need to have atmosphere where companies doing well should be supported, not just financially, but with other aspects. So we need to have mid to long-term evaluation of these companies, not just a short-term profit. Thank you.
A lot of strong messages today. To me, they all point to one conclusion. I believe that next mile mindset shift is moving from ambition to alignment. The good news is that we already have bold commitment, great initiative across sectors. Our biggest challenge is not ambition, it is fragmentation, I think. So what we need now is to connect those efforts across sectors and across borders so that individual commitments become collective impact. Nature positive, nature strategy is business strategy. Nature positive is no longer just an environmental strategy. It is a business strategy, procurement strategy, risk management strategy, and ultimately a long-term value strategy. So if we can align markets, government, investors, civil societies, producers, those multi-stakeholders around shared purpose, we can move from individual success stories to system-wide transformation. So the future depends on turning ambition to alignment and alignment into joint action.
Thank you very much, Hanaoka-san. I think you summarized it super well and very comprehensively. If there's one thing that we can take from the conversation today, that is the ocean is no longer an environmental issue. It is an economic infrastructure issue, and it is that protecting the ocean is not just for nature, but it's for business resilience and for social prosperity. So thank you so much to our panelists for such an insightful discussion. An applause to them, please, and enjoy. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。皆様、今一度盛大な拍手をお送りください。
Thank you very much. Another big round of applause, please.